everybody, and welcome to Adventures in Interning. I know this setup looks a little different from last time, but we're going to try this face to face stuff. You're going to be seeing lots of different formats until we figure out something that works. We are live from my office. Welcome. Sorry I didn't clean up the place for you all, but it's a work in progress. And I am here right now with, of course, our intern Kolby, our amazing student ministries intern.
I try.
And so Colby is going to interview me. We're going to continue from our talk of stepping out in faith. And Colby's going to interview me. And we have the chat open. So if anybody's listening to this live stream and you have questions, you can post it on the chat. But other than that, I am just going to be the recipient. I'm not quite sure all that will be asked. And so we'll just give it a shot and see what happens. Do your worst.
Okay, so one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you was, where did it all begin for you? When was it that you really started to pursue ministry?
I would probably say the idea of ministry I probably pursued when I was maybe 19 or 20. When I was in high school, I'd volunteered in kids ministry, but mostly it was to hang out with my friends who were leaders at this kids event where we would take kids out to a swimming pool, and then we would go to we would do this event and stuff, and I really liked it. I got along with kids. And then the children's pastor there asked me if I wanted to volunteer and teach Sunday school, and I started doing that. And I started working with kids, and it was pretty cool. And then our children's pastor was no longer there at the church. So the senior pastor asked me if I wanted to be the children's ministry intern. And at first, I wish I could tell you that I knew, I guess I should say, the summer before my senior year, I felt a call to ministry. But me thinking I knew everything, I thought it was going to be like a drama pastor or something like that, which is nothing wrong with that. But I was like, well, that's what I'm good at, and that's what I like to do, so that's probably going to be what I do. And there was a group of us that would meet with our senior pastor, and he would mentor us and stuff. And so when this happened and this opportunity was available, he asked me if I wanted to do it, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it was kind of cool because I had an office and I got paid pretty well, and I had a budget and all this stuff, and it just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, awesome. So when you took your first step, how did that come to be? Like the process and discerning and really figuring out where Jesus was leading you into. What was that like? Just take us into that for a second.
I wish I could tell you, and this is how I envy people like you that went through HLI, and seriously, you guys had all these classes and all this stuff about being self-aware. I knew that I wanted to be in ministry. I didn't know what that looked like, and really, I was just looking at what pastors looked like that I was around. And then when I got this opportunity at the church, I wish, I prayed about it, but it just seemed like a better opportunity as a job.
Yeah. And
so I wish I could say that I knew right off the bat, this is where God wanted me. But in all honesty, it was really just a job.
Mm-hmm. For
I had
sure.
to be honest.
For sure. So after this youth ministry, not youth ministry, but kids ministry internship, where did you go from there?
So I did the children's ministry intern thing for a couple of years, and I really liked it, and I started to love it. And then the church that I was at was looking for a children's pastor. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm 21 or 22 at the time, and I think I'm God's gift to ministry. I really do, because I'm a man who wants to be a children's pastor, and in the denomination I was a part of, that was a rarity. Mm-hmm. And I got along well with kids, and I was a lot of sizzle, but not a lot of steak, if I had to put it accurately. And so I applied for the position, and they told me that they didn't think I was ready. And they wanted to hire somebody for me to intern under. and they were looking for somebody who was established. Like, looking back, I get it, because they were looking for somebody who was established. They were looking for somebody who had done it before and somebody who was willing to mentor me. And I just felt like, in the moment, I felt disrespected. Like, they should have considered me. And really, looking back, they really didn't do anything wrong. I mean, like, whenever a candidate came out, they took me to lunch with them to see how I meshed with them. And, like, if I didn't get along well with them, that played a role in what they were looking for. But I don't know, I just was kind of bummed out by the experience. And so I resigned from that, and I ended up getting a job at a bank. Because I was like, I'm just going to get a job. I don't know what I want to do. Well, yeah, because like at that time I looked at it and I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do. Like, and I just thought, okay, well, and in my mind, for some reason in my mind, I thought it was just going to be an easy transition. And God was like, I totally didn't have an understanding of what God, where are you leading me? But I was just like, okay. So I got a job at the bank, and I was like, I really don't want to teach kids. I really don't want to do this stuff. Like, maybe I'm not cut out to do it. And then the guy's name is Jason Smith. He was my college pastor at this old church I was at. Well, he went to plant a church, and he was like, hey, I want you to come be on there and maybe like do some drama or stuff like that. So I went to his church, and I started running drama and running some stuff there and doing that. And let me know if I'm rambling. There was a lady who came in. She was like the director of education for like our district or whatever. And so she was coming in to help with children's ministry. And so she was like, hey, Mike, will you help me teach kids church? It's like Final Dude Kids Church. And she was basically like getting my feet wet again. And then I just kept doing that. And then I eventually just like became... It was there that I started to understand like it was more than like a job. That was when I started working with kids. And I remember there was one week I worked with kids, and I just started like taking the stories and just explaining it like I like to explain it, and just being real. And a kid accepted Christ, and I was like, okay, so maybe this is what it's about. Like, make it real. Like figure out what God wants me to do with it. And so then that pastor ended up moving to another plant church out in like Higley, and he was like, I want you to be my children's pastor. So I ended up doing that. So then while I'm still working at the bank, I'm volunteering as a children's pastor. And I would end up volunteering as a children's pastor at different churches for like 15 years. So I think, so from there it went to that plant church, and then for about 2 years we did that, and that was where I learned a lot. And I mean, everybody was working second jobs because all our money needed to go into the church. And it was really where I started to like really realize, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, once I started really seeking God and going, okay, like what do you want me to do? Like, what is, and not like my spin on it, but okay, God, what do you want children's ministry to look like if I'm running it?
Yeah.
And then it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. So where are you living at the time, during this time?
I'm living in an apartment with like 3 other guys that are running the church as well. And so I'm just kind of doing my thing. Like, I had a girlfriend for part of the time I was an intern, but I really was just kind of being a single guy doing it. And so it was just, if I wasn't working at the bank, I was doing stuff for the church or just hanging out. And it was cool. I mean, we got to hang out with, it was like our worship pastor, one of our associate pastors, and then just a couple other people. And it was a pretty cool environment.
That's awesome. So you're a single guy running through this, right? Where along the lines did Becca come into play?
Okay, so I think about a year into the plant church in Higley, a friend of mine, a mutual friend of Becca and I, hooked us up on a blind date.
Okay.
And then the next day, she came to my church. and came to visit. And so we started dating pretty much shortly after that, and um, we we dated for a year before we got engaged, and shortly after we got engaged, I was invited to go be a kids pastor at an inner city church in Phoenix. And so, but for that year we were dating, Becca and I were all in on our church.
Mm-hmm.
But and we got engaged, but a friend of Becca's that I ended up meeting, they were resurrecting the children's ministry at this inner city church, and he had seen me teach kids, and he was like, I need your help to come down here and try to start this back up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because they had kids there, but they didn't have like a formal children's ministry, so I did that for a couple years.
Okay.
And so,
And we're still working at the bank at this time?
yes, I'm still working. Actually, no, I got a job at the University of Phoenix.
Okay.
So it's like '04. I got a job at the University of Phoenix. So now I'm doing University of Phoenix while the plant church and all of that stuff, and doing the volunteer children's ministry. It was still volunteer, so I'm putting in 20 hours on top of everything else.
Wow. Okay, so you go from, so you're still working at the plant church. You're also restarting.
No, I leave the plant church to restart.
Okay, so what was that process like? Why did you decide to leave? What was kind of the deciding factor? Where was Jesus leading you in that?
Well, I had been happy where I was at, and my friend my friend Brian, he was at the time he was the education pastor at this inner city church, and it was a church that Becca used to go to. So we would visit occasionally because Becca was still attending there off and on. Like, she was actually a worship leader there for a while, and I was hanging out with some of the people there, and he asked me about it, and it took me probably a good 3-4 weeks, and the first part of it was trying to figure out, okay, like, what are the pros and cons? And at the time, I can't remember if Becca and I were engaged at the time, or if we were on the road to being engaged.
Yeah.
And Becca can probably correct me on some of this timeline. But we knew that it was a decision we had to make together.
Yeah.
And so we talked about the good and the bad, what we liked about both churches. And then it was just prayer and trying to figure out what it was and where it seemed like God was leading, and what I felt at the time was, and Becca ultimately left the decision up to me.
Oh, wow.
You know, she's like, because it wasn't like our income yet. You know, I was still working at University of Phoenix, and I continued to work at University of Phoenix for many years. But I just felt like it was the next chapter. So I had been a children's pastor in like 2 affluent churches. Not affluent, like one church was affluent, one was in an affluent neighborhood. And just different groups have different needs or different demographics. And this was a chance to be in an inner city church. It was right next to like a battered women's shelter. So we had a lot of single moms there that Becca was able to minister to and stuff. And it just felt like it was the next step to take, like, of growth, not only of growth, like I would be starting a kids ministry, but also in an inner city setting. And really, for not that the kids in the other churches didn't need it, but it was more of like the next challenge.
Yeah, so take me into this discernment process that you had where now you're not only, and she ends up leaving the decision to you, but what was it like to bring Becca in on this process?
We talked about it. We had our individual pros and cons, and then really it was walking her just through my thought process.
Yeah.
And telling her where I was coming from, and then finding out where she was coming from, and then and it's a process, you know. And I maybe I'm glorifying it because we were still figuring out communication. But it's a process I think we continue to this day, where it's like, okay, do you have any thoughts or feelings a certain way? Sometimes, like, if I'm in the middle of it, having that perspective from somebody who's with me but sees it from a different angle, that helped out a lot. And I just walked her through it, and you know, she didn't want to tell me what she what we thought I should do, because she wanted me to come to a conclusion. So we were going to see, okay, here let's find out what God is saying, and then let's compare answers and find out where we go from here.
Mm-hmm.
And we both felt like, okay, this was the chance.
Yeah.
But it was more just walking her through the process and getting her feedback.
Yeah.
And sometimes she had feedback, and sometimes she was like, I don't know, this is something you've got to do.
Yeah.
And so we went from there. So I was like, okay, I think this is what we're going to do. And she's like, okay, I think so too. I think we should do it. And she's like, I support you. And we just had to go through the process.
Yeah. So what did it turn into?
So it was a good experience.
Yeah.
I came in, and I mean, it was, when I say inner city, like, the people were great. It was just, there was, and I mean, they had they had some supplies and stuff like that, but it was just looking at what they had, looking at the kids, trying to figure out what it's going to look like, recruiting leaders. And I didn't have the most experience doing a ton of that stuff. When I was an intern, there were a lot of leaders already there, and people were guiding me on who to recruit. At other places, I kind of had some built-in leaders. And this one, I was building it from scratch, but trying to figure out. And it was really interesting because it really became about those, like, single moms and those families, because the big demographic was, we had a lot of the kids that came from the shelter, but we also had a lot of refugee kids, and I think it was from Liberia or something. We had a lot of refugee kids. And so it was a wild bunch, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But, like, it was cool because there were a lot of kids that I got to be like a father type figure to.
Yeah.
But it was cool because Becca was right there alongside me. So Becca was really supportive to the moms, but I was trying to be that, like, male influence for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up going really well, and we really enjoyed it. And I even got involved in I learned about Royal Rangers there. But I really learned a lot, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
And then we got this head pastor who came from Teen Challenge. He was a director of Teen Challenge, and he came over. And he was probably one of the best pastors I've ever served under. I mean, I love Jack. He's probably the best pastor I've served under, but this pastor's name was Reggie.
Yeah.
He was just incredible. We butted heads sometimes, but looking back, and it's one of those things where looking back, like, once again, it was my pride. He was the first one to call me out on my love of titles and love of being recognized, and I did not like that. And it wasn't the best splitting. He kind of just, like, I'll be honest, it was kind of one of those getting relieved of my duties type things, because we kept butting heads, and it reached a point where it was like, okay, maybe this isn't the best thing. But looking back, like, I saw him a couple years later, or a year later or something, and I remember I apologized to him because I understood, like, oh man, he was trying to make sure that I didn't have a big head. Like, he was trying to really just ingrain some stuff in me. And so he's an incredible guy. Yeah. And so, like, I'll never forget when he took over the church, and he was interim pastor, and then they voted him in. And I remember his first day, he's like, I'm really excited, and I've just prayed about what God wants to do here, and I'm going to be sharing my vision that God is the vision that God has for this church. And if you're on board with it, awesome, full steam ahead. And if not, may God bless you at whatever church you end up at. And I was like, this dude's the real deal. Oh my gosh. And that was kind of the start of learning, like, okay, if God's given you something, move forward with it.
Yeah.
So, and I should say, I guess what in the middle of that, we got married and we had our first kid. Uh-huh. And that's when we had Delia. Mm-hmm. And my pastor, and I can't believe I forgot this. My pastor at the time said, Reggie said, you should take a break. He's like, in the Bible, they would take a year off. And he goes, but I think you should take like 3-4 months off and just be a dad. And I was like, no, I'll be a dad and I'll do all of this. And I was just stressed out. because I'm learning how to be a dad. Becca and I are learning how to be parents. The dynamics changed, and I was just stressed out, and it just, everything came to a head, and it was just like, I'm also working full time. I think at this time I started going to school, so I'm going to school full time online.
Wow.
I'm volunteering as the kids pastor, and we just added a baby. I was getting 3 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
And so something just had to give, and I look back at it now, and really, he kind of saved me from myself.
Yeah.
Didn't feel like that in the moment. I was pissed. But he really saved me from myself.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so is that when you started looking for another job and getting back into ministry here, or what happened in between that?
So I realized after that I needed to take a break. And so Becca and I started visiting churches, but every church we visited was a friend's church.
Yeah.
And people were automatically ready to plug us in and volunteer. They were like, I was, whenever we would go, one place, I had a friend that was like, dude, I'll have you guys, you can run my kids' church, she can run the nursery and all that. And I didn't want that. And so there was one church called, at the time, Phoenix Calvary Temple. And the pastor there, Tim, we met with him. And before I said much, he goes, I'm just going to tell you something. He's like, you can come to our church and I'm not going to ask you to do anything for me.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And Becca's dad was like a leader in that church. Because Becca came from a ministry family, and so it was like, we're not used to no expectations. And he was like, you don't have to do anything. He's like, you can just attend. He goes, use our services, drop your kids off in the nursery, whatever. He's like, and don't attend or don't serve. He's like, and then what he taught me was and I think I taught it maybe at some point, was like the Jesus pendulum, how Jesus would retreat to spend time with the Father and then serve. And he said, I would rather you serve out of an overflow of what Jesus is doing in your life than feel obligated. That was the first time anybody had really said that to me that I can remember. I was like, okay, whatever, dude. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to church and I'm not doing a thing. And so for the first 8-9 months, we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, we went, we hung out with family. I dropped them off in the nursery. People would ask me occasionally. I was like, nope, not helping. And then finally there reached a point where I looked at Becca and I remember going, I think I'm ready to volunteer again. And so I helped out in kids' church once a month. I became a Royal Rangers commander. But I was still attending church, but it had been like I wanted to. Like there was a point where I didn't want to serve. I thought I was, I hit that point where I'm like, I'm done. Like it's not worth it. I just want to be a dad, be married, have a job and whatever. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to volunteer and do this again. And then I started doing it. And then we met some friends who were attending this church where they were looking for a kids' church director. I was like, I don't know that I want to do this again. But we met with the pastor, we met with the staff, was this church in Mesa. They used to be called Church on the Journey. Met the children's pastor. We really liked what the church was about. And we were like, okay, we're getting back into this. And so we ended up going there and being the kids' church pastors, because this church already had a children's pastor. And so I was like, okay, I'll do this. And it was getting back into it in a slightly bigger, and in a bigger church. And it was that one was where I learned about what it was like to actually be organized and to plan ahead.
Yeah.
Because I was a fly by the seat of my pants. I'm sure if you talk to people, they'll still say that I'm fly by the seat of my pants. But the lady there, Jody Gieslin, who was the children's pastor, she was one of the most organized people I'd ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And she was always planning ahead. I mean, she was one that taught me, like, when Vacation Bible School, like, if you're not already planning in January, you're done. You're toast. And so we did that for a couple years. And I kept feeling like, why does everything only last 2 years and then I move on to the next thing?
Yeah.
But, yeah, we did that for a while. So, and then It was a change in pastoral leadership. And along the way, I guess, in all of this, I know that we talked about the choices to make. It was always a lot of prayer. And we always wanted to make sure it wasn't emotionally invested, because it was an emotional decision, because um, it's easy when you're upset, especially like in ministry, or like if something frustrates you, or if you don't feel, or if you feel like I could do this better, that you start to look for opportunities. And it's like, where was my heart? Was it that we needed to leave, or that this was God's leading?
Yeah.
And so we would pray, and it wasn't, we tried not to make a list, but what we were doing was, like, there were times we would pray and say, okay, God, like, you know what we're looking for. And we would make a list, but like kind of bring the list to God and just be like, this is what we're looking for ideally. Like, break us if this is not supposed to be the case. And, you know, but a lot of times when we would leave or we would move on to the next chapter, it was like, okay, well, like, God, you have to make it clear. Because the new option, you know, grass does always look greener on the other side. But it was like, you know, we knew, you know, just from experience, like, okay, one, like, is it healthy to be leaving every 2 years to go somewhere?
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm thinking, like, okay, and in all these cases, it was to help start something or be part of something. It was like, okay, like, is this just going to be, am I going to be spending my ministry life 2 years at a time? Like, by the time we got to this church in Mesa, I was like, I don't know that I want to keep doing this, but we had friends there. The overall culture and what they wanted was good.
Yeah.
But they went through a pastoral transition, and there was a lot of staff turnover.
Yeah.
And we just felt like, okay, not sure what to do now. I should back up a little bit. This was around 2012. I know that I've jumped around, so bear with me. But I got laid off from my corporate job in October of 2012.
Yeah.
And so in October, I'm still working at this church in Mesa. And I'm being told, you know, and there was a guy there named Dave Papia who I ended up working for. And basically, like, I'll never forget, he really took me under his wing for like the last 5-6 months I was there. And I remember, like, he basically told the pastor, like, Mike's going to work for me. Now, I gotten laid off, so I'm making unemployment. I'm looking for jobs. But I have all this spare time that I can go volunteer at the church. And I'll never forget, he was driving me around in a golf cart looking at the property, and he goes, Mike, I'm going to tell you what people think about you but haven't told you. I was like, okay. And he's like, people think you're a flake. They don't and he's like, do you think that's accurate? It's like, yeah, I do. And he goes, we're going to fix that. And so he was coaching me and guiding me. And, you know, by the end of the year, there was talk where the pastor was like, we need to work to get Mike on staff. And I was thinking, God, this is why you got me fired in October. Right? You know, like, oh, here we go, God. And I remember, like, when I got laid off from my job, I thought that was the door to ministry. And I applied for pastor jobs in 17 states.
Wow.
Like, everywhere. And I never got past a first interview. I applied for 165 different jobs outside of ministry. Nothing.
Wow.
And I remember, and then the pastor that had decided about staff, he actually was leaving to plant a church. So that opportunity, like, there was a ton of staff turnover, that was out the window. And so I am just like, what the crap?
Yeah.
And so we are living on faith, making $100 and something a week, God is answering and I thought in my head, like, okay, this is it, ministry, full-time ministry. Because when I was an intern and volunteering, I always wanted to get back into full-time ministry. And, you know, and Becca and I thought, and I think I thought of it more where I was like, this is it. And so I was like, God, I'll go where you send me. And I just threw out all sorts of resumes everywhere. I mean, I applied for stuff in Vermont and in Chicago and I mean anywhere that was hiring. And I made it. I had a lot of first interviews and I didn't get called back. It's like, okay, this sucks. And so by May or June of 2013, I was like, God, I will say yes to the first job you give me. Whatever job I get, I'll say yes. I don't care. Because I had been praying and I was like, oh, here's the opportunity, here's this opportunity. And I really think that I had been catering it to what I wanted. And I hadn't been listening for God like I thought I should, like I thought I was. And I was praying, and I mean, my faith was growing, but it was like faith in provision. So it was like faith in God, you'll provide the money that we need, or God, and there's stories about that. But when it came to a job, it was, okay, here's a great opportunity. Oh, this could be it. But it was more optimism than the prompting of God.
Yeah.
And so in ministry, it was the same thing. And I just thought, some church is going to be lucky to have me. Like, I am ready to go, reborn. I've learned a lot. And finally, I just hit a point where I was like, you know what? Okay, God, like, I'll just take whatever job I can get. Like, beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I had coffee with a friend who was a youth pastor here at this church. And I just felt like and here's the weird thing. I kept reading his statuses on Facebook. And I was like, oh, I used to go to high school with him. Or, I mean, we had similar friends in high school. Like, I hung out with him in high school. And I was like, you know what? I should just connect with him and see how he's doing.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was God-led. Like, because I don't know, I'm reading all this stuff, and I was like, and I felt like God was like, you should reach out to him. I was like, okay. And so we had coffee, and we didn't talk about anything really going on. I mean, we talked about life. Like, I was just really encouraged by what was going on in youth ministry, and I don't know, I felt like I just wanted to touch base with you. And we started talking, and he goes, hey, and then he told me towards the end, he's like, hey, our children's pastor might be leaving soon because she wanted to pursue a family. And he was like, hey, if that job opens up, do you want me to just let you know? I was like, sure, okay, why not? But by that time, I hadn't put myself in, like, I didn't think, oh, here we go. I was just like, yeah, cool, okay. And so the position opened. I turned in my resume. I get a phone call, have a phone interview, never hear from this church.
Yeah.
Don't hear from them. Meanwhile, I end up getting a job working at the airport. And I was like, this sucks. And I said, but God, I told you that I would take the first job, because I felt I had just reached a point where it was almost like I had just, like, I'd been humbled.
Yeah.
And just realizing, like, okay, like, I can't call my shots right now.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, okay, God, first job I get, here we go. And I worked at the airport making just slightly more than unemployment.
Wow.
But what I know, and I remember, like, when I got the job at the airport, I remember telling Becca, because I was praying about it, and I was like, God, I know I said this, but I don't know what, like it felt depressing. It was really depressing. By this time, we had gotten kicked out of our house. We were living with her dad. So, like, it was us. And this time I have 3 kids, so there's the 5 of us living with her dad.
Wow.
And I'm just like, I don't want to do this. And Becca reminded me of that scripture that says, do everything you do as if, for the glory of God. And I remember saying, okay, fine, I'm going to work as hard. I'm going to be the best dang airport gift shop. It's an airport gift shop. I'm selling shot glasses and keychains, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. Ugh. And I didn't talk about being a Christian. I didn't do this stuff, and I worked as hard as I could. And I just remember, like, my prayer life grew a little stronger then. And I just remember like coming home and just being just depressed about work, having to work there, and it was just like, okay. But I just remember like, okay, like that was where it started to be like, okay, God, what do you want? Like, I got nothing. And I just remember I felt like God's leading was just work as hard as you can. Like, work as hard as you can. And I remember that one day I was arranging magnets. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
And this girl goes, "Hey, you're like a Christian, right?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Can I get your advice on something?" I was like, "Yeah." I go, "But," and I was, and it was funny because I was just like, "You know what?" I was like, "What have I got to lose?" And I said, "Yeah, but just so you know, I'm a Christian, so my answers are going to be geared off my relationship with God." And she went, "I know. That's why I want to ask you." And she asked for some relationship advice, and I gave it to her. Then the next day, her coworker goes, "Hey, I heard you talk to so and so. Can I run something by you and get advice?" I was like, "Sure." And then so all of a sudden it was like, and I'm just asking them what's going on in their lives, and they're sharing with me, and I'm sharing with them. And then, about a month in, they're like, "Can you pray for me? This is going on. I'm a little nervous." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I didn't feel comfortable praying with them on the spot, but I'm like, "Yeah, totally. Like, keep me posted." I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, people are actually trusting me with stuff. And I remember, like, I'm this 30, I think at the time I'm like 33 or something, and I'm in this inventory room with my manager, and everything she says, I'm just like, "Yeah, you got it." And she looked at me and she goes, "Why are you like this?" I'm like, "Why am I like what?" She's like, "You're just agreeable. You do everything I ask you to do, and you don't complain." Now, in my head, I was like, I hate this, and I hate that I'm folding T-shirts for 7 hours, but this is my life. But I was like, "Well, you're my boss, right?" I'm like, "You say I do. That's how this works." And she goes, "Who thinks like that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I went home and I told Becca this, and I remember Becca was like, "Work as if you're working under God." She's like, she's not used to it. And in my mind, I thought, like, oh, this is what it means.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay. So this is where I'm at. That's what I'm going to do. It's like, until I get another. And I applied for other jobs, but I was like, okay, so if I'm at the airport, okay. And I remember they had talked to me about being a manager, and I was like, yeah. And it's not their fault. I was just like, okay, like, all right.
It's the airport, man.
But I would, and I got along with management, and, because I was just trying to be a good employee. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to take care of people. And I started realizing, like, okay, doesn't matter where I'm at. And I still have a keychain on my house keys from the airport as a reminder of, like, that was the most ministry I've probably ever done. And then about 3 months in, I get a phone call from Mark Morgan at Vineyard. And he goes, "Hey, are you still interested in the job?" And I was like, what is even happening? Laugh out loud. Oh, this is on Twitch. Okay. All right. We're having some fun, Holy Bonsai Tree.
Holy Bonsai Tree, what a name.
By the way, I kind of want to use it as an exclamation point, like in a staff meeting, be like, "Holy Bonsai Tree!" And so, by the way, thanks for watching. And and so I just remember, like, going through the interview process, but this time it was, okay, I'm just gonna do it, and if I do it, I got you, Mikey. Nice. Do I know you? But if not, I want to get to know you. Our first interaction, I'm excited.
I like bonsai trees.
I like bonsai trees. I watch Karate Kid. That makes me an expert, right? I don't know. But I just remember at that point it was like, if this works out, and I remember this time it was different. It was like, if it works out, it works out. If not, if not.
Yeah.
And and I remember praying about it, and at that point, it was like I was like, let's just go for it. And I wish I could tell you that I felt a peace about it, but there was part of me that was worried because through everything God had shown me, I honestly got a little scared where it was. I honestly got a little scared where I thought like I don't want to be a jerk again. Like, am I ready for it? Am I like this is exciting? But then at that point, I felt like God, just your friendly neighborhood youth ministry employee. Bryce, is that you? This better be you. Or if not, hi, ministry employee from Vineyard Church North Phoenix, whom I love and adore. Sharing my ministry journey. I don't know why I'm yelling at you too. I'm sorry. But in the prayer and the choice, because I know I haven't talked a lot about the choosing, and I'm sorry about that.
No, it's
that was
fine.
the whole thing. Was I just was like, okay, here goes nothing. But I knew I had nothing to lose. I wanted it, but when I prayed about it, and I guess now the proper term would have been holding it with my hand open, or holding it with a loose grip, or however you want to put it. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to be me, and if I'm the guy they want, cool. So I met them for coffee. I met Pastor Mark for coffee, and they brought me in for an interview. And at the same time, another church wanted me to be their children's pastor. And I made it to the final round, and I had two choices to make. Like, I had been offered the job for both.
Wow.
And so I went to this place of not having one to having two, and that one was slightly easier because it was night and day. But I just remember, like, I was overwhelmed, and for the first time I realized, like, a ministry job, like, it was a gift. And I think that was the difference. Was this was the first time I was overwhelmed. So I remember that Sunday I came, like, I was candidating or whatever here, and I went to the classrooms, and we went to service, and we met people, and we loved it. My mic is a bit quiet. Is this better? I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm a punk right now. I didn't get a lot of sleep. I apologize. And my shirt's riding up in the back. This is what I get. I'm a hot mess. But I remember that
Better. LOL.
tell me your identity, holy bonsai tree. Reveal yourself. But I remember when we left and Jack had said, like, we want you to be the guy. I remember we went home, and I remember just thinking, like, I can't believe this is happening. Whereas before, like, had I gotten a job right after I got laid off, I don't think I would have appreciated it as much.
Yeah.
But I remember just praying, like, okay, God, is this the step I'm supposed to take? Like, is this what you want? And that was the first time it was like, I felt like God was saying, do it, but I didn't know. I had no freaking clue what I was doing. Like, I was like, I don't know what this is going to be like. I don't know. And so I remember when I called, I said, Jack, I would love to take your offer and do this. And I remember when I got done, it was like, man, I hope I made the right decision. Like, and not because of the church, but because of, like, I had never experienced something like that before, but it was praying and God just going, okay, take this step.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of learning, a lot of falling down, but yeah. And then I was the kids pastor here.
Just like that.
Yeah, it was so weird. It went from, like, nobody to, like, 2 offers, but I could tell I was in a different headspace.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that the airport job was so appealing. It was just that I was like, oh my gosh, they want me. Like, And can I handle this? Am I even ready for it? I was freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then I never thought I wanted to do youth ministry. I'll be honest. I used to make fun of my friends who were youth pastors because I thought, "Hi, Bryce."
So it is Bryce.
It is Bryce, who's my good friend. I know you've heard this story, but others haven't. I'm old. I'm repeating my stories. Yeah, bingo. I love you, holy bonsai tree. We'll have to stream sometime. But I remember, like, the situation happened where the youth pastor was no longer here. And they asked me if I wanted to be the youth pastor. And it took me a good month. Because part of the, I don't know what the reasoning, thank you, buddy. I don't know why I don't know what part of the reasoning was. By the time I had been doing the children's pastor thing for 4 or 5 years here, a good chunk of my staff was teenagers.
Yeah.
And they would come hang out in my office sometimes, and I got to know them. Once again, God was showing me just the beauty of organic relationship. I was just like, I'm going to get to know people.
Yeah.
And I got to know them. And so part of it was built in.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, like, I was like, my first thought was, if I don't take this, am I fired as a children's pastor? And they were like, no, you can still be. I was like, okay, cool. But I remember, like, I don't know why they didn't get sick of me, but I kept pulling everybody in for meetings. Because they're like, do you have any questions? And I just kept praying and having questions and having questions. Like, our children's pastor now, Jessica, she was working with me. She was running nursery and early childhood stuff. And I remember, like, things where I would say, hey, if I move into youth, can you make sure, like, Jessica still needs to be invested in or whatever. And all this stuff and praying. And we went to the international conference, and I was praying. And finally, I was like, okay, I'll do it. And factoring in, but this time it was different because whereas before I was either single or newly married or a new dad, we had 3 kids. We were firmly entrenched as a family. And we're trying to figure this out as a family. But I think what sealed the deal for us at Vineyard was they cared about us as a family. But now I'm looking at Becca going, okay, like, we need to pray about this because what's that going to look like investment-wise?
Yeah.
Because we are going from being my kids' pastor to now being youth pastors. And we're going to be dealing with teenagers, and I don't know how not to get involved with people. So, like, am I ready for this? And part of me, I thought, like, I don't know how to talk to teens. Like, I didn't want it to be my job. It's easy to boss them around and talk to them when I don't have to be responsible for them. But now, like, I'm going to get rated on this stuff? And to be fair, they haven't judged me, like, on attendance or that. But I'm like, my job is to minister to youth. Like, I'm not good at that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm the kids' church pastor. But I felt like God had really said it early on that I was going to do it. And Becca kind of just thought that it was kind of a foregone conclusion. Mm-hmm. She's like, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And after a month, I said, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I've loved every minute of it, and God has blessed it. Well, maybe not every minute of it, but God has blessed it.
Most minutes.
And most minutes. It's been great. But I just remember, like, it's so weird, like, because when I talk with students and, like, when I even talk with you and we're talking about how to make decisions, I'm like, I still struggle with the same thing. Like, what am I supposed to do? Because now my life is more geared towards, like, you know, now people ask, like, well, what's next? Are you going to be a youth pastor forever? I'm like, I don't know. I think so, at least the end of the year.
Taking this one step at a time.
I have youth on Wednesday night. I know I'm going to be there. So.
Oh, man. I don't even know what I'm having for dinner tonight, man. Don't ask me this question.
I don't know either. I'm like, crap, we're having to get dinner tonight. Dang it. But but that's the thing. Like, yeah, it was weird. I remember last night you and I were talking and you said, what's it like being responsible for people? And that's a great question. I even told Becca, I'm like, I don't know. Like, but the choices were definitely like you factor in like, okay, how's this going to impact my family? Because one thing we even had to pray about was, okay, like how are my kids going to interact with the teens, and not like, but like if my wife was going to be there, there were times the kids were going to be there,
Mm-hmm.
and there were times like, okay, how are we gonna do this? Like, how are we going to make teenagers a part of our life now,
Yeah.
while still having kids, like young kids?
Mm-hmm.
So then they stressful, yes. And then they joined my youth group, and that made it even harder. No, I'm kidding, but it's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
And then I met you, and then it was like, okay, God, 15 years of struggling, and it was all to bring me to you, Kolby.
I don't know about all that, but yeah. So I guess just as we wrap up really quick, what was the discernment process like for bringing on an intern?
Um, you know what? It was a lot of, and it's gonna sound weird, but it was a lot of, it's not you, it's me. Because, like, we had always talked about having interns here,
Mm-hmm.
but we weren't equipped with it. We didn't have a system in place. And then I met you at Limitless, and we talked a little bit about it then. I think like you mentioned it maybe in passing, or maybe not in passing. Maybe it was at CosCon you
Yeah, it was
talked about it.
CosCon is when we talked about it.
And I was like, and I was at first I was taken back because I thought this makes sense, and I was like, holy crap, I don't know what to do with an intern. Like, interns are what my friends who have bigger churches, people like Bryce have interns. I don't. And it was more of, I was afraid, and I'll be honest, part of the process was, man, I don't know that it's worth interning under me.
Yeah.
Like, he's gonna see how I do this. That's where I know him from. Bryce was there for CosCon.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's where I know him from. So like, I was just like, man, like I very rarely feel confident in what I do.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, he's just gonna look at this stuff and he's gonna be like, I thought you were gonna hit your wagon to the wrong horse. You're gonna feel like that. And then, but I was like, you know what? As I prayed about it, it was, and Becca had really given me some wise counsel of, it's not really, and God had confirmed it, and Becca confirmed what God had told me, and it was, I don't think he did it because, like, I don't think it's because you're an amazing youth pastor. Imposter syndrome is real, yes. And it was one of those things where it was like, I don't think it's because you're an amazing youth pastor, but because you actually took the time to invest. I was like, okay. And so I kept praying about it and putting together, going, okay, God, but I want to have something in place. What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And I literally was thinking when I prayed about it, like, God, if this is supposed to happen, you have to show me what an internship looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here's what I can bring to the table. And I put together this presentation, or like this summary, and I gave it to our pastor, who is incredibly detail driven. And I felt like it was a confirmation from God when he looked at it, because I talked to your director, I talked to Jackson, and I was like, what do you think? And Jackson was like, I think it's honestly one of the better spots for him to go. I was like, okay, cool. I talked to your youth pastor, Amy, and Amy was like, yes, do it. And I'm like, okay, God, this is working out too well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and I was like, okay, God, there's a way I like to do things. And I meant like in order, properly. Because I remember with Amy, I said, listen, I want you to know, I know he's talking about helping you. I want him to be an intern. I'm not trying to take him away from you. I was like, I have every intention of returning him to you. And she said, listen, I think it's a great idea. He talked to me about it. If God brings him back, great. If not, I want what's best. I was like, holy crap, okay, this is... And then I started to get scared because I'm like, this is going to happen. And so I went to Jack, and I'm like, here's what it looks like. I was like, and I talked to all these people, and he looked at it, and I'm like, okay, he's going to grill me. And he goes, this looks good. What needs to happen next? And I was like, what? And then it was just a host home. Yep. And it was like, okay, God. But I knew in my head that it wasn't, I had learned that it wasn't, when I had prayed to God about whether or not this should happen, I looked at what I felt needed to happen, but I also ran that through like a biblical filter.
Yeah.
You know, like when I said I want to make sure that, you know, his director's on board. I want to make sure his youth pastor's on board because I don't want to be accused of poaching. Like, I want everything above board and communicating. Like, I want this to be done right, but I want to make sure that he has a host home. Like, I want this to be done with excellence. But what I felt was, and I was like, okay, God, like, does this match?
Yeah.
And everything lined up fairly biblically as far as, okay, this is what we needed to do. And so that was the list I went off of. And so everything was in place except for a host home. And I was like, and there was part of me that I was like, I can make this work, but we're going to be rigging it. And I really felt like at points God was like, nope, like wait for the host home.
Yeah.
And so it was unlike anything because it was bigger than I was ready for. And it started happening easier than I was ready for. And I was like, oh, crap, I got to be responsible. Like, I remember your first week, I went home and I told Becca, like, I'm responsible for him. I'm like, well, he can take care of himself and feed himself and things like that. That's great. I'm going to have to change you. That's a plus. But I'm like...
I hope we don't get to that point.
It's going to be more likely you're going to have to change me. I'm just telling you. But honestly, I was like, I'm responsible. Like, he's trusting me. And Becca was like, yup. I was like, thank you.
That's why you keep her around, right?
That's right. No, she's honestly, but I think that was part of the process was, like, Becca plays a huge role in the discernment because a lot of times, there were times where she would have an uneasy feeling about things and I didn't listen.
Yeah.
And it was like pinpointed that was the one thing.
Oh.
And so I've been trying to learn more. Like a lot of times with a lot of decisions we make, you know, it's a family decision.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's something where, you know, Becca's like, you know, I'm going to trust you and go with it, I still want a take from her.
Yeah.
Now, even if she goes, nope, I don't have anything. Okay, cool. Then this is what I think we should do.
Yeah.
And we'll still talk about it and make sure that we're on board. But, you know, yeah, it was weird. It's been a weird journey.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it was a good one, though.
Yeah, it brought me here. So how's that going for me?
All right, I guess. All right, well, that's all I have.
This is fun.
It was fun.
So we're going to keep doing these. And it'll just be something new every week. Maybe this is just like a journal or chronicle of what our journey's going to be.
But we can look back and see how things went.
But Holy Bonsai Tree did manage to follow me. And so I now have 3 followers. I feel very fancy.
Like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications.
I have not heard of Vineyard. I have not heard of Vineyard Gaming. What do you know? I have not heard of Vineyard Gaming.
Wait, what?
From the Vineyard Church in Kansas City, run by John Mann from Vineyard Church of Kansas City.
I've heard of it. Ryan Amano's talked to me about it. But, yeah, that's the church I'm from. Yeah, well, no, sorry. That's Kansas City North. I'm from Vineyard Overland Park.
Bruh. All right, well, give me the info. I'll do this. I don't know, though. Like, I'm playing NES games right now.
I'm trying to get him into Warzone. We're working on it.
All right, so, dude, you did a good job.
I tried.
All right, so we'll see you all later. Bryce, send me that info, and we will make it happen. Guess we'll talk to you guys later.